Hey everyone, I'm JP and I want to talk about this new Fantasy Super Rugby Pacific competition that's just been announced. It's got cash prizes, $10,000 first prize, it's got weekly prizes. It seems like it might bring back that Fantasy Super Rugby community that went missing a few years ago, I feel like, and I just want to share my thoughts about it, my analysis of the format, and what my strategy is going to be going into this competition and how it all works. Now, if you're brand new to fantasy sports or fantasy rugby, you might be able to keep up with what I'm talking about, but probably you should go sign up first, click through the little how to play tutorial, then come back here and things should make more sense. Otherwise, if you played fantasy before, stick around and let's get into it. So first up, I want to talk about what makes this competition kind of unique or a bit different from other competitions. The biggest thing to be aware of is that there's unlimited transfers. So you don't need to pick a bench, you don't need to look forward several weeks just to make sure you can field a full team. You can just go week by week, look at the starting lineups and just pick purely for that round. And this really reduces the need for planning and strategy a bit. It might feel a bit off for the veterans, but it also just saves you a lot of time and reduces anxiety about injuries and not being able to fit a full team. So there's pros and cons there. Because of that, I don't love it, I don't hate it. We'll see how it goes. And the next major thing to know is that there's a super generous budget. You'll pretty much be able to buy everyone that you want. There's $100 million budget. The most expensive players cost 10 million max. There's a lot of really good players who are only 7 or 8 million. So you will be able to get anyone you want and you'll probably have cash left over. The player prices, they might change as the season progresses. The rules don't actually explicitly state whether they do or not. That kind of leads me to believe they'll probably remain fixed. But if they do change over the season, that will change strategy a bit. But for the moment, we'll just have to wait and see how that actually works. Now, you might think with unlimited transfers and virtually unlimited budget that all you need to do is just pick the best players, pick all the All Blacks, just let them do the work for you week in and week out, and you wouldn't be wrong. That'll get you most of the way there. But you do have to optimize a little bit more than that to pull ahead of the pack. And my method for doing this, and it's one I've used with success in many fantasy rugby competitions over the years, and the way this competition's format is, it'll work even better than any of those. So my method, and it isn't at all rocket science, is to just keep an eye out for lopsided matchups. And what I mean by that is, and this is just an example team, by the way. But what I mean by that is lopsided matchups is you want to look at the fixtures and just identify where you've got a really strong team versus a really weak team. Like games where one team is really going to put up a cricket score, and then you want to load up with players from that team, and they'll be the ones who really butter your bread. There's another layer to this as well, where we sort of look at the lopsided matchups in terms of specific areas of the game. So I'm talking about looking at where you got a team with a really strong weaponized scrum versus a team with a weak scrum, or teams that have strong mauls versus teams that have weak maul defenses. Now, these aspects of the game, they kind of go hand in hand with that broader dynamic where you've got a strong team and a weak team. Not always though, and understanding this deeper layer of the game will help you decide to choose the individual players that will be the ones who really make a difference in these lopsided matchups. Now in this round one, there actually isn't any super obvious lopsided matchups. I mean, it's round one, so we don't have a lot of information about what the relative power is going to be between these teams. We kind of just have to go off last year's form. And I mean, you start from the bottom. Force and Pacifica, they're probably the two weakest teams, you know, kind of even there. Blues and Chiefs, that's a replay of the grand finals, two really strong teams. And Drua, Brumbies, but it's in Fiji. Then Drua really strong there, even though I probably would favor the Brumbies. I mean, that could still be like a close or scrappy game. Waratahs and Highlanders, these are also two kind of weak to middling teams. Waratahs have made a few pickups in the off season since the Rebels disbanded. Their talent has kind of dispersed into the wider Australian scene, and those Australian teams will be getting a little bit stronger because of that. But yeah, Tars and Highlanders probably pretty even. Highlanders also have Jamie Joseph back in the driver's seat, so both those teams, they should be on the up this year. And then we got Crusaders and Hurricanes. I mean, big question mark over this. Are the Crusaders gonna be shit like last year? Are they gonna be good again? I don't know. You tell me. So no obvious lopsided matchups here, but you know, we go to round two. Here's another example: Reds versus Pacifica. That's a game where you might want to stock up on some Reds. Hurricanes versus Drua, home game for the Hurricanes. Drua, they're terrible playing away. You know, some profit to be made stacking up on Hurricanes. Maybe same for these last two games as well. Blues versus Highlanders, Brumbies versus Force. We'll have a lot more information after round one, but that's a better example of what I'm talking about in round two. Identifying those really lopsided matchups. And the third key thing you need to understand as well is that you can only select 4 players max from one team. So even if you identify these matchups, you can't load up to the help with those players. You can only choose those 4, and you have to think really hard about those 4 to pick, because that's probably what's going to be the difference between the good players and the mediocre players. But we don't want to get too tunnel visioned on this style of thinking as well, where we're just picking players only in the lopsided matchups, because there will be players who are consistently strong performers week in, week out, even in matchups that aren't steamrolls. And these players, they will reveal themselves as the season goes on, but to get the edge, you really want to identify them early and pick them up so that you can bank those points that they're getting before everyone else does, which does happen. Eventually everyone's, you know, they're gonna be picking all the same players when they know who those consistent guys are. And we will talk about specific players later. I might do a separate video if this one really starts to drag on, but yeah, we'll still, in this video, we'll still talk about all the big names and talk about who to keep an eye on and what to watch out for. And there's definitely a few traps in this format, and we'll talk about that now, because a lot of it has to do with how the scoring works in this game. And the first thing you notice with how points are allocated is that it's really stacked in favor of the backs, which isn't uncommon in fantasy rugby. And that's just because a lot of these big scoring categories like tries, try assists, line break assists, defenders beaten, offloads, like these are all big point scoring categories, and the backs, they all get to dip into all of them, right? Whereas, you know, those forwards, especially the type 5, that's not really something they get to partake in a lot. And we can see this really clearly if you look at 2024 team stats, right? Like, when you get 15 points for a try, you know, Blues, Hurricanes, top 2 teams, they got over 80 tries last year. 80 times 15, that's 1,200 points allocated just for tries. You look at these other categories, 7 points for a clean break, 100 clean breaks, 700 points are getting allocated to these teams just for clean breaks. 2 points for defenders beaten, 900 total points being allocated. Offloads, you get 150 offloads. Offloads are only worth 2, you get 300 total. Not really strong category. Guys who offload a lot, they're not gonna necessarily rake you in heaps of points. But if you're doing one of these things, you're often doing all of them, right? You beat a defender, you got a better chance to do an offload, you got a better chance to get a clean break. You might be getting a clean break assist. If you get an offload, you get a clean break, you're more likely to score a try, you're more likely to get a try assist. Those are all big points categories. So that's why you really want to look at backs when you identify those lopsided matchups. You want to load up on the guys who are, you know, going to be registering in all these categories. And that really contrasts a lot with what's happening with the forwards, especially the front 5. Because obviously, you know, they're not the ones getting the big line breaks and the try assists and all of that, not that often. But they do get these unique categories, like down here, props. They get 3 points for every scrum won outright. I presume that includes scrums you win on your own feed. That's quite valuable because in any given game, the team will have anywhere from 4 to 10 or more scrums. So, you know, let's say you have 7 scrums on average, you win 6 of them, that's 18 points right there. And, you know, that's what you get just on top of the regular tackles that you make and anything you get from, you know, offloads, carries, whatever else. Same also with locks as well. They get points for lineouts. Obviously not exclusive to locks. Hooker also will get points for 1 point for every lineout that you complete successfully. Back rowers obviously receive a lot of lineouts as well. And that's what's going to make these positions more valuable than proper lock, because they get to effectively double dip into their exclusive categories. And this applies to hooker doubly so, because they get the points for the scrum, they get the points for the lineouts. You do have to watch out for this here, where lineout errors are quite penalizing. You throw a knot straight, you get -2. It's not 100% clear to me how this worked though. It says includes handling error, so I don't know if that means like a knockout at a lineout from the jumper, like is that -2, or is that just -1 like you have down here? Sorry, let me scroll up so you can see. Just a regular knock on, you get -1. I mean, does that double up for a knock on and a line out? I don't know, but I will be paying close attention to see how that all works. But yeah, hookers, they're really valuable. They get the scrum points, they get the line out points, and obviously because they attach at the back of the maul, they can get tries as well. So they're going to be a really valuable position. You do want to really consider who you pick for your hooker. Each week you only get to pick one, and they'll also be really consistent scorers because of this. They're able to dip into all the categories, and that's what makes a player a strong pick in a position, if they get to dip into all these categories. So yeah, hookers, they will be very reliable point scorers. They'll be very reliable captain options. And I spoke earlier about identifying that deeper layer in a lopsided matchup, identifying teams that have strong mauls and games against team with weak maul defense. Picking hookers in those games, that's going to be really valuable. Making them captain's going to be really valuable, and that's something to pay a lot of attention to. Another thing to note as well is that not just what you do get points for, but what you don't get points for. There's no points for carries, no points for kicking meters, no extra points for tight end scrums, no extra points for post contact meters, even though running meters do get scored 1 point per 10 meters. But the big one here is that you don't get any points at all for carries. A lot of other fantasy games you will get points for carries, not for this one. And that will affect some teams and some players quite a bit. Not, necessarily enough to just ruin them, make them bad, but it's definitely something to be aware of. Like, for example, you think about a guy like Rob Valentini. He's a guy that does a huge amount of carries. I think he was one of the top carriers last year, but they're always giving the ball to him, one out from the ruck in the pod or whatever. He's just heading it up in traffic. He's not really busting through people. He's not getting big meters. He's just trying to get those couple of meters to get them moving forward, and he does that well. But that sort of thing, it doesn't get points the way the format is in this game. So, and that can apply to teams as well. You think about a team like the Blues. They're really focused on the grind with their forward. They're all a bunch of Rob Valentinis basically. They're just hitting it up, getting a couple of meters at a time, dominating those contact meters, dominating the collision, just trying to get the go forward and building momentum up that. So you got a lot of forwards in there doing a lot of carries, but they're not necessarily getting tackle busts or big meters. So something to keep in mind, but not something that's necessarily decisive. You still do want players who do get carries, just because you got to be carrying the ball to get points in those other juicy categories. You got to carry the ball to get a tackle bust or an offload or whatever. And also you have to look at things that give you negative points. This game's actually quite forgiving. You get -1 for a knock-on and -1 for a penalty. Like, that's a bit silly, only -1 for a penalty. -1 per tackle miss, that's quite big. Tackles are a decent source of points. 1 point per tackle. You do want to pick players who do rack up tackle numbers. They're generally going to be quite good. But players that get a lot of tackles but also miss a lot of tackles, they're kind of leaving a few points on the table. So just be aware of that when you're looking at stat sheets. But apart from that, yellow card and red card, they hurt pretty bad. They always do. Not much you can do about it. I mean, these cards, they don't happen often enough that you want to avoid the players who are, card magnets if they're actually good. So use your discretion with those ones. I don't sweat it too much. Missing shots at goal, whether they're conversions, penalties, or drop goals, that's definitely a big thing. You do want to get a kicker that is good for your 10 slot. That is You know, it's not huge points, but it's reliable points for that position. And the one you really want to look out for is really just this one here. You want to get hooker who is a really reliable line-out thrower, because hookers can get a lot of points, but they're not a great thrower, then that can really carve out a lot of their edge. So you think about a guy like Almoa, he's a great prospect for a hooker because he can do a lot around the park. He's good with ball in hand. He can do runs and make those tackle busts and get meters, which, you know, it's kind of rare in the front row. But last year his throwing was really good for the Hurricanes. I think that's why he ended up getting picked for the All Blacks. But then we saw in the All Blacks his throwing wasn't so great. So, you know, pay attention to him, pay attention to his throwing this season. And yeah, it's something that could really make or break him for this position as a fantasy pick. Now, excuse it being daytime, I had to go to bed, but let's go over each position and what to look for, how they go about scoring. Already talked about hookers. They get to double dip in the scrums and the lineouts. They score in pretty much all categories. They're going to be very consistent scorers because of this, and they have a really high upside because they can get those maul tries. So again, I just want to emphasize, put a lot of thought into who you pick at hooker and pay attention to the fixtures. Look at when you're getting teams with weak maul defense or really strong mauls, and try to pick the hookers that are gonna take the most advantage of that in each round. Moving on to locks. Locks, they're going to be not good scoring prospects, I think. Main thing here is identify the locks that are the primary line-out receivers. Not all locks get a lot of line-out ball. You'd probably be surprised. Some teams, you get guys like Nick Frost, they get most of the throws. But in other teams like the Blues, for example, the number one excuse me, the number one line-out target, it's Satudu, who isn't even a lock. So that's something to look out for, and it's also something to think about as well when you are looking at back rowers. There's a lot of really good back rowers, but the edge for some of them will be that they get a lot of line-out throws. And other than that, with locks, you know, same as the props, you just want to look out for guys who are good around the park, both sides of the ball. So guys who make a lot of tackles, or guys who carry and are able to rack up tackle busts and offloads and that sort of thing. So nothing too much to think about there. With the props, again, you just want to get the guys busy, both sides of the ball, guys who make the tackles, guys who run, but also try to favor guys who are in strong scrums, especially scrums that are good enough to be a weapon that can really push another team off their ball, because that'll get you those extra 3 points for those scrum points, and that'll add up. Now with the back rowers, there's a lot of very good options in the back row. It's gonna be difficult to make decisions here because, you know, you got to choose 3, but there's just so many good players here, and again, they're it's a position where they get to dip into all the categories because they do get to make those line out tags as well. So yeah, I'd say try and identify the guys that do get used a lot in the line out, because that could be sort of like a bit of a tiebreaker for your decision making when, you know, you have a lot of back rowers who are in strong fixtures where they have potential to really put a lot of hurt on a weaker team. And there's a lot of guys in back row who do also rack up lots of tackles as well. You know, don't sleep on tackles. A good tackler will get 15 to 20 plus tackles in a game. There's a lot of sevens that do get those high tackle numbers, but they don't necessarily get a lot of points on the other side of the ball. So so that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, there's a lot of back rows to go over, and yeah, I'll spend more time on them later. With your halfbacks, again, halfbacks probably not going to be a super high scoring position, because again, there's no points for passing, no points for kicking. That's what halfbacks are doing most of the time. What I'm going to be doing is looking at those halfbacks that really like to snipe, those halfbacks that are a little bit greedy and like to run with the ball. And the two guys that stand out to me, it's guys like Fakatava and Noah Hotham. Because guys that like to snipe, you know, they're the ones they'll get that tackle bust, or maybe that line break, or they'll get in behind, they'll be set up for a line break assist or a try assist. Another thing to think about as well, occasionally you get halfbacks who kick goals, not that often. Only one I can think of at the top of my head is maybe Lonergan, but even then he just does the sort of long range kicks, so not really a live option in that respect. But yeah, it's those sniping halfbacks that I'll be looking at. And for 10s, 10's kind of a weird position. Sort of like halfback, you're doing a lot of passing, you're doing a lot of kicking. You do again want to favor those 10s that are a little bit greedy, that like to carry the ball themselves. You know, the ones that are more likely to get that line break or that line break assist. You probably want to stay away from those game managing 10s who, you know, shovel it on and have that strong kicking game. But you do also want to make sure that you get a good kicker as well, because these points are going to be pretty exclusive to that 10 slot. They're going to be reliable points, and you know, the guy that really comes to mind here is Damien McKenzie, because he is a ball in hand 10. He is a bit greedy. He does kick goals for the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a strong team. They score a lot of tries. That's a lot of conversion opportunities. And they actually, if you look at their season stats, the Chiefs, they actually took a lot of penalty shots at goal. You know, you look at the Blues, they're on 14. I think the Hurricanes are on 10. So for whatever reason, they take more shots at goal. So yeah, that makes Kenzie quite appealing for that slot. Sorry. Another guy's Lolosio. You know, Brumbies also take a lot of shots at goal, and he's the one to take their kicks. But another quick thing to mention actually with 10s is to look for guys in the 10 category who might start in another position, whether it's 12 or 15, for example, because if 10 isn't a strong scoring position, you might be better off going with those guys. Like one guy I'm thinking about is Stephen Perifetta. If Bowden Barrett's going to be starting at 10, maybe he starts at 15. He is also, he's played a lot of 15. He's kind of greedy there as well. He likes to carry it back. He runs it back. He doesn't just kick it. And that's the sort of player we like in fantasy. He's going to carve off those run meters. He'll beat that first defender, chance for line breaks, all of that. So that's something to look out for. And in general, that applies to all positions in fantasy. Sometimes you'll get players that get put out of position in a different category. Like, for example, one I noticed earlier is that Alan Grace, he's actually listed as a lock, not a back rower. So so players who end up getting listed at a position in a category that's not really a strong scoring one, they can be guys to go with. Next position after that, midfield. Now midfield and outside backs, we're really getting into the sort of high upside positions. These are the players who can really rack up big scores in games because they're the ones who are going to be getting points for all those offensive stats, like I was talking about, the clean breaks, the defenders beating, the assists, the try assists. So again, lots of options in midfield and outside backs. A lot of guys who, you know, who can beat people and who can break the line. But it's going to be a bit boom bust here. You're going to get a lot of wingers who have their day and then they don't. And this is where we want to play the game again, where you're looking at the fixtures and you're looking for the fixtures where those backs are really going to get fed. And with the midfielders in particular, they're probably more likely to, you know, rack up these offloads and defenders beaten. They get a bit more ball, they're in a bit more traffic, and guys who are individually strong can really rack up these stats, you know, independent of anything else. With the outside backs, one thing to think about as well is that you do get 1 point per 10 running meters, so that really puts fullbacks on the radar, because they're often receiving the ball in that backfield, and there are guys who will kick the ball back. There are also guys who are kind of greedy, they want to run it back, and those are the guys to really look at, because not only are they getting the run meters when they run that ball back from deep, but you know, they're more likely to beat that first defender, and then who knows, maybe that turns into a line break, maybe that turns into an assist. So don't sleep on the fullbacks in particular when looking at your outside backs. And lastly, note about captaincy and the seasonal boosters. For your captain, I feel like there's two ways to go. I feel like you can back your hooker because they're always going to get a decent score just because of how they dip into reliable points and the line out and in the scrum, and they always have that upside of more tries. So hookers, they're always going to be really reliable. And the other way to go is a bit higher risk versus reward. High risk, high reward is again just looking at the outside backs that are going to get fed in those fixtures where you might get a blowout. So yeah, you're thinking about when the Blues, the Chiefs, the Hurricanes, when they're gonna play Moana Pacifica or the Force or someone, and if you feel like one of those outside backs is gonna get fed, you make them your captain, and you know they get 2 or 3 tries and a bunch of line breaks or whatever, then yeah, that's really gonna push you far ahead. But yeah, that is a higher risk way to play than just backing a hooker, and you might want to adjust how you approach that over the season. If you're higher in the rankings, you might want to protect your position, play a bit more conservatively going for hookers. If you're far behind and you feel like you need to catch up, that's when you might gamble a bit more on those outside backs and the blowouts. So yeah, you can reevaluate how you want to approach captaincy as the year goes on. And also in this competition, there are 3 boosters that can be used just once through the season. One of them is a triple captain. Your captain gets triple points. Another one is co-captains, where you can choose 2 captains in one round. And the last one is called limitless, which gives you unlimited budget for that round. That one's pretty straightforward. It's kind of useless just because you get such a generous budget in this format, and if you ever find yourself in the situation where you do need more budget, just use it. You probably never need it, so just use it. If we do find ourselves in a situation where the player costs go up, you might need to be a bit smarter about that. I don't think that's the case, but just keep that in mind. In general, with all these boosters, I don't recommend using them early. You want to wait a bit and get the lay of the land about who the good players are, who the strong teams are, who the weak teams are, and then pick your moment when you use your co-captain and your triple captain. They're one use, so yeah, no rush. Like, again, you want to wait for when you get that Hurricanes versus Moana matchup. I mean, that's coming up in round 4 apparently. Might still be a little bit too early, might not. We'll see when we get there. And yeah, you might wanna triple captain one of your outside backs, or the Blues, they favor that more. Maybe you wait till the Blues play Moana and get that more going. Your captain Ricky, something like that. Give him the triple captain. And if you ever get a round where you've got more than one really juicy fixture, that's when you might use your co-captain booster as well. So don't use them straight away, but don't forget about them either. You do want to think ahead to when those matchups you want to target are. You don't want to wait till the later end of the season when you've sort of forgotten about them, and then you end up using them on a matchup that, you know, the best time to use them's already passed. Now, I do want to go over all the players in a bit more depth and look at their individual season stats from last year, so that we can really try and identify who the best options are. That's what the meat of this competition is. It's choosing the best options from a bunch of really good options. This video's already gone on too long, so I'll do that in another video. What I might do though is I think I'll wait till the team lists are out Wednesday or Thursday, and then I'll go over all the players who are actually listed as starters, and And at the same time, we'll look at other players as well who might not be listed because, you know, maybe they're injured or they're the Reds, they're basically on bye. And we'll just do that all at once. And at that same time, that's when I'll be picking my actual team as well. This is not going to be my team. We'll talk more about that then. So tune in, hopefully, and I'll see you then.